The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the ballroom as Marcus adjusted his bow tie for the third time that evening. The annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala was in full swing, and his wife Rebecca looked radiant in her emerald gown, working the room with practiced ease. "Remember," Marcus whispered as she passed by with 2 champagne flutes, "no embarrassing stories tonight. The Hendersons are here, and I'm this close to closing that deal with them." Rebecca's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, darling. I'll be on my best behavior." Marcus watched her glide away, that familiar knot of anxiety loosening in his chest. After 15 years of marriage, he'd learned that Rebecca had a tendency to overshare when she'd had a few drinks. Last year's company Christmas party still haunted him. She'd told everyone about his failed attempt at learning salsa dancing, complete with demonstrations. The evening progressed smoothly. Marcus networked with potential clients, laughed at the right jokes, and kept one eye on Rebecca as she chatted with various guests. She seemed unusually animated tonight, her laughter ringing out across the room more frequently than usual. He noticed she kept glancing toward a man standing near the bar, tall, early 40s, with an anxious demeanor that seemed out of place among the confident crowd. When the foundation's director took the stage to thank the evening's major donors, Marcus relaxed. The hard part was over. He'd maintained his professional image, and Rebecca had kept her promise. Then Rebecca's name was called. Marcus felt a jolt of confusion. They'd made a substantial donation, yes, but Rebecca had never mentioned wanting to speak publicly. She practically floated to the stage, accepting the microphone with a gracious smile that made his stomach drop. He knew that smile. It was the one she wore when she was about to do something impulsive. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Rebecca began, her voice steady and clear. "Supporting children's education has always been close to my heart, for reasons both professional and deeply personal." Marcus held his breath. "Please," he thought, "just thank everyone and sit down. I couldn't have made this donation without the support of my family, my friends, and—" She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on the nervous man by the bar. "My lover." The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd, uncertain and awkward. Marcus felt his face burn, his hands clenching into fists. She'd promised. She'd specifically promised not to embarrass him. "It's an inside joke," Rebecca continued, laughing as if she'd just delivered the punchline to the world's funniest story. She pointed directly at the man by the bar. "Isn't it, David?" Marcus's eyes snapped to the man, David, apparently. But instead of laughing along with the joke, David had gone absolutely white. The champagne glass in his hand trembled visibly. His eyes were wide, panicked, darting between Rebecca and the nearest exit like a trapped animal calculating escape routes. That wasn't the reaction of someone in on a joke. The applause was scattered and uncomfortable as Rebecca returned to her seat beside Marcus. She was still smiling, seemingly oblivious to the tension she'd created. "What the hell was that?" Marcus hissed through his clenched jaw, maintaining his smile for the benefit of those watching. "Oh, lighten up," Rebecca said, waving her hand dismissively. "It was just a little fun. David and I have this running gag from the literacy program I volunteer at. He's always joking that he loves my teaching methods." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were fixed on David, who had abandoned his drink and was making his way toward the exit with quick, purposeful steps. The man's entire body language screamed guilt, shoulders hunched, head down, moving with the desperate urgency of someone fleeing a crime scene. Marcus's analytical mind, honed by years of reading people in business negotiations, began piecing together fragments he'd ignored before. Rebecca's recent evening volunteer sessions. The new lingerie he'd found in her drawer, tag still attached, never worn for him. Her sudden interest in her appearance, the gym membership she'd insisted on renewing. The inside joke suddenly didn't seem funny at all. Marcus barely slept that night. Rebecca had come home from the gala chattering about the event's success, apparently oblivious to his silence. She'd kissed his cheek and gone to bed while he sat in his study, nursing a scotch and replaying that moment over and over in his mind. David's face. That wasn't embarrassment or surprise at being called out in a joke. That was pure, undiluted fear. By Monday morning, Marcus had made a decision. He arrived at his office early, before his assistant, and closed the door. The business card he discreetly obtained from a colleague 6 months ago, after suspecting a partner of embezzlement, sat in his wallet like a loaded weapon. He'd never thought he'd need it for personal matters. Insight Investigations, a crisp female voice answered. I need to hire someone, Marcus said quietly. It's regarding my wife. 3 days later, Marcus met with Detective Sarah Chen in a coffee shop across town, far from anywhere he or Rebecca might be recognized. Sarah was professional, direct, and mercifully free of judgment as she slid a folder across the table. Your instincts were correct, Sarah said simply. David Garrett, 43, divorced, works as a program coordinator at the Riverside Literacy Center. Same place your wife volunteers Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Marcus opened the folder with steady hands, though his heart was hammering. Inside were photographs, Rebecca and David at a quiet restaurant in the neighboring county, their heads close together. Rebecca and David entering a boutique hotel. Timestamps, dates, a paper trail of deception spanning 8 months. They are careful, Sarah continued. They vary their locations, never go to the same place twice in a row. But they have a pattern. Every Thursday, hotel check-in at 6 p.m., check-out by 9 p.m. Your wife tells you she's at the literacy program until 9:30. The gala, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. Why would she do that? Why draw attention to him? Sarah leaned back, her expression thoughtful. In my experience, she wanted to. Some people get a thrill from hiding in plain sight, from having a secret that's technically in the open. She probably thought she was being clever, that no one would ever suspect the truth behind an inside joke. But his reaction. He didn't know she was going to do it, Sarah finished. And he panicked. Mr. Garrett doesn't strike me as someone comfortable with risk. He's a family man at heart. His divorce was finalized only a year ago, messy custody battle over 2 kids. I don't think he signed up for public acknowledgement, even as a joke. Marcus absorbed this information, each detail another nail in the coffin of his marriage. What else? Sarah hesitated, then pulled out another set of photos. These are from earlier. Much earlier. The images showed Rebecca and David at what appeared to be a literacy center's holiday party 2 years ago. They were standing close, laughing. Another photo showed them outside, Rebecca's hand on his arm. The timestamp read December 2023. 2 years. Marcus felt sick. This has been going on for 2 years. The physical relationship appears to be recent, 8 months, as I said. But they knew each other before. Mr. Garrett started at the literacy center 3 years ago. Your wife began volunteering there around the same time. Marcus thought back. 3 years ago, Rebecca had announced she wanted to do something meaningful with her time. He'd been supportive, even proud. She'd always loved teaching before they'd gotten married, before his career had taken off and made her working unnecessary. He'd thought the volunteer work made her happy. It had. Just not for the reasons he'd believed. There's something else, Sarah said carefully. I tracked Mr. Garrett's movements over the past week, since the gala. He's been agitated, breaking his routines. He called in sick to work twice. And she pulled out her phone, showing him a screenshot of text messages. He's been trying to contact your wife constantly. She's not responding. Marcus read the messages. David's desperation was palpable. We need to talk. You can't just ignore this. Do you understand what you've done? People are asking questions. May I? Marcus gestured to the phone, and Sarah nodded. He scrolled further back, finding older messages that painted a picture of a relationship far more complex than simple adultery. There were declarations of love, yes, but also arguments. David pleading with Rebecca to leave Marcus. Rebecca refusing, saying she wasn't ready, that she needed more time. David threatening to tell Marcus himself, then apologizing hours later. Plans made and cancelled. Promises broken and renewed. She's been stringing him along, Marcus said slowly. It appears so. The question is why. Sarah paused. There's one more thing you should know. I did a financial background check on Mr. Garrett, standard procedure. His drowning in debt, child support, legal fees from his divorce, credit cards maxed out. And according to his bank statements, he's been receiving regular deposits. Cash deposits, always under $10,000 to avoid reporting requirements. Marcus looked up sharply. From Rebecca. I can't prove it definitively, but the timing suggests it. The deposits started 8 months ago, right when their physical relationship began. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture Marcus didn't want to see. Rebecca hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been paying for it. And the gala speech, that moment of what he'd thought was drunken recklessness, might have been something else entirely. A power play. A reminder to David of who held the cards. Marcus closed the folder and stood. Thank you, Ms. Chen. Send me your final invoice. What will you do? She asked. Marcus looked out the coffee shop window at the ordinary people living ordinary lives, and envied them. I'm going to have a conversation with David Garrett. David Garrett's apartment was in a modest complex on the eastern edge of the city, the kind of place where young families started out and divorced men ended up. Marcus sat in his car across the street for 20 minutes, watching the windows of Unit 3B, gathering his courage. He'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but now that he was here, all his prepared speeches seemed hollow. What did you say to your wife's lover? How did you demand answers from a man who probably had as many questions as you did? Finally, Marcus crossed the street and knocked. The door opened immediately, as if David had been waiting by it. Mr. Jameson. David's voice was resigned, defeated. He looked worse than he had at the gala, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans. I wondered when you'd come. We need to talk. David stepped aside wordlessly, and Marcus entered a small, sparsely furnished apartment. A child's drawing was stuck to the refrigerator, a crayon family of 4 that David was no longer part of. The sight stirred something uncomfortably like sympathy in Marcus's chest. I'm not here to fight, Marcus said, remaining standing. I'm here for the truth. All of it. David sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Does it matter? You know enough. I'm sleeping with your wife. I'm a terrible person. There's your truth. Why? Marcus demanded. And don't give me some line about love or not meaning for it to happen. I want the real reason. Why did this start? Why did it continue? And why the hell did Rebecca call you out at that gala? David laughed bitterly. You think I know why Rebecca does anything? I thought I did, once. I was an idiot. Start at the beginning. For a long moment, David was silent. Then, as if a dam had broken, the words poured out. I met her 3 years ago at the literacy center. She was volunteering, teaching adults to read. She was amazing at it, patient, kind, actually cared about the students. We became friends. Just friends, I swear. I was married then, trying to hold my life together even though my wife and I were barely speaking. David paused, wiping his face. Rebecca listened. She understood what it was like to feel invisible in your own marriage. We'd talk for hours after classes, about books, about life, about dreams we'd given up on. She told me about you, how successful you were, how proud she was of you, but also how lonely she felt. Like she was an accessory to your life, not a partner in it. Marcus flinched but said nothing. When my marriage finally ended, it destroyed me. The divorce, losing custody of my kids, the legal fees, I was drowning. Rebecca helped me through it. She'd meet me for coffee, let me vent, even help me move into this place. And somewhere in all that, David's voice cracked, I fell in love with her. And she felt the same. I thought so. She said she did. Last year, around Christmas, things changed between us. It became physical. She said she'd wanted me for so long, that she'd tried to resist but couldn't anymore. I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. The money, Marcus said. She's been giving you money. David's face flushed with shame. I didn't ask for it. Not at first. She offered, said she wanted to help, that she had access to your accounts and you'd never notice. I should have refused, but I was desperate. My kids needed things. My ex was threatening to take me back to court. Rebecca made it seem so simple, so harmless. How much? Total? Maybe 60,000 over 8 months. Cash deposits, like you said. Always with the promise that it wasn't about the money, that she loved me, that we'd be together soon. She just needed time to figure out how to leave you without losing everything in a divorce. Marcus felt cold. But she wasn't going to leave me. No, David agreed quietly. I started realizing that around 6 months ago. The excuses about timing, the cancelled plans, the way she'd go hot and cold. One week she'd talk about our future together, the next she'd barely respond to my texts. I tried to end it several times, but she'd reel me back in. And I let her, because I'm weak and stupid and I loved her. The gala, Marcus prompted. David's hands clenched into fists. I didn't know she was going to do that. We'd had a huge fight the week before. I told her I was done, that I couldn't keep being her secret. I threatened to tell you myself if she didn't. I thought maybe if you knew, it would force her hand, make her choose. So she beat you to it. In the cruelest way possible, David said bitterly. Calling me her lover in front of hundreds of people but disguising it as a joke. Making sure that if I tried to tell you the truth, I'd just look insane. Who would believe me? No, really, she wasn't joking. We actually are having an affair. I'd sound delusional. She made me look like some pathetic man with a crush, not a threat. Marcus paced the small living room, his mind racing. This was worse than simple infidelity. Rebecca had manipulated David, used him, paid him off, and then publicly humiliated him to maintain control. The woman he'd been married to for 15 years was a stranger. There's more, David said quietly. Things I found out after the gala, when I started asking questions instead of just accepting what Rebecca told me. What things? David got up and retrieved a laptop from his bedroom. He pulled up a social media profile, a woman named Jennifer Collier. This is David Collier's ex-wife. I got in touch with her a few days ago. Marcus sat down heavily. Why? Because Rebecca told me stories about you. About how controlling you were, how you monitored her spending, how you made her feel small and worthless. I believed her. But after the gala, after that public humiliation, I started wondering, what if she'd lied about you the way she'd lied to me? David clicked through to a message thread. Jennifer told me something interesting. 5 months before my divorce, she received anonymous messages. Screenshots of texts between me and a woman, nothing explicit, just friendly conversation, but taken out of context they looked suspicious. Messages suggesting I was having an affair, that I was hiding money, that I was planning to leave her with nothing. Rebecca, Marcus breathed. Jennifer can't prove it, but she believes it. The messages came from a burner email account, but the wording, the tone, she thinks it was a woman who knew both of us. At the time, my marriage was already rocky, but those messages pushed Jennifer over the edge. She filed for divorce, fought for full custody, painted me as an unfaithful deadbeat. And suddenly I was free, desperate, and perfect for Rebecca's purposes. Marcus felt sick. She orchestrated your divorce. I think so. I think she wanted me available, vulnerable, and dependent on her. I was a project, Mr. Jameson. Something to occupy her time and make her feel powerful while she stayed safely married to you and your money. The two men sat in silence, united by their shared betrayal. Finally, Marcus spoke. I need you to tell me everything, every detail, every conversation, every payment. And I need you to testify to it if necessary. For your divorce. Yes. But I have a feeling there's even more to this story than either of us knows yet. David nodded slowly. There is one other thing. It might be nothing, but Rebecca made a comment once, when she'd had wine. She said something about how this wasn't her first time managing a complicated situation. When I asked what she meant, she changed the subject. But it stuck with me. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Sarah Chen. I need you to dig deeper into my wife's background. Go back further, before our marriage. I want to know about every relationship, every job, everything. How far back? Sarah asked. Marcus looked at David, at the drawing on the refrigerator, at the ruins of a life Rebecca had casually destroyed for her own amusement. As far as you need to go. Sarah Chen called Marcus 2 days later, her voice tight with something he couldn't quite identify. Urgency? Disbelief? We need to meet, she said. In person. And you might want to bring a lawyer. They met at Sarah's office this time, a nondescript suite in a downtown building. When Marcus arrived, he found Sarah with another person, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. This is Patricia Lawson, Sarah introduced. She's a forensic accountant. After our last conversation, I thought we might need her expertise. Marcus shook Patricia's hand and sat down, his stomach knotting. What did you find? Sarah opened a thick folder. Let's start with Rebecca's past. Before she married you, she was engaged to a man named Thomas Whitmore. The engagement ended abruptly 10 years ago. I tracked him down, he's living in Seattle now, remarried with kids. He was reluctant to talk at first. At first? Marcus prompted. Once I mentioned Rebecca's name and explained why I was calling, he opened up. Marcus, Thomas had a very similar experience to what you're going through. Rebecca pursued him when he was vulnerable. He'd just lost his job in the 2008 financial crisis. She was supportive, loving, perfect. They got engaged within 6 months. Sarah pulled out printed emails. But Thomas had a best friend named Ryan. According to Thomas, Rebecca developed what he thought was a friendly relationship with Ryan. Thomas even joked about it, his fiancée and his best friend getting along so well. Until he discovered they were having an affair. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Just like me and David. Not quite, Sarah said grimly. Because when Thomas confronted Rebecca, she cried, apologized, blamed Ryan for seducing her. She convinced Thomas to give her another chance. And Thomas, who loved her, agreed. He cut Ryan out of his life, moved to a new city with Rebecca to start fresh, used his savings to put down payment on a house she wanted. Let me guess, Marcus said bitterly. She left him once his money ran out. Almost. 3 months after they moved, Thomas came home early from a job interview to find Rebecca in bed with their landlord, a wealthy divorced man in his 60s. This time, there was no apology. Rebecca told Thomas she'd never loved him, that she'd outgrown him, and she wanted him out of the house. The house he'd paid for. When he refused, she filed a restraining order claiming domestic violence. Did he fight it? He tried. But Rebecca had been building a case, journal entries about feeling afraid, screenshots of text messages she claimed were threatening. All fabricated. Thomas lost everything, the house, his reputation, his savings on legal fees. It took him 5 years to rebuild his life. Marcus closed his eyes. And nobody warned me. Different city, different social circles. She reinvented herself before she met you. New job, new friends, new history. The Rebecca Sinclair who married you wasn't the Rebecca Sinclair who destroyed Thomas Whitmore. How many others? Marcus asked. Patricia Lawson spoke for the first time. We've identified 3 definite cases before Thomas, possibly 2 more that are harder to verify. The pattern is consistent. Rebecca targets successful but emotionally vulnerable men, establishes herself as the perfect partner, then orchestrates situations that allow her to extract maximum financial benefit before moving on. She spread out bank statements and financial documents across the table. But here's where it gets more complex. I've been analyzing your joint accounts, and Rebecca's spending patterns over your 15-year marriage. She's been exceptionally careful, but there are anomalies. Patricia pointed to highlighted entries. Regular cash withdrawals, always under the reporting threshold. Payments to various LLCs that don't seem to exist. Credit card charges for services that have no digital footprint. Over 15 years, I estimate Rebecca has diverted approximately $1.2 million from your joint assets into accounts you don't know about. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. Impossible. I review our finances. She's very good, Patricia said with a hint of grudging admiration. She buries the transactions among legitimate expenses, uses your business accounts to disguise personal transfers, takes advantage of tax deductions and charitable donations. Look here, this donation to the Children's Hope Foundation that she made such a show about at the gala? It came from one of your business accounts, categorized as corporate philanthropy. But the tax receipt went to a personal account in her name only. Sarah pulled out more documents. We also found something interesting in Rebecca's background check. She has a trust fund, inherited from her grandmother. It's worth approximately $3 million, managed by a firm in the Cayman Islands. She's never touched it, never mentioned it. Do you know why? Marcus shook his head numbly. Because accessing it would make it part of the marital assets in a divorce. By keeping it hidden and living off your money instead, she ensures that if you split, she gets half of your assets plus her entire trust fund. She's been planning her exit strategy since before she married you. But she hasn't left, Marcus said. 15 years, and she's still here. Patricia and Sarah exchanged looks. That's what doesn't fit the pattern, Sarah admitted. With her previous victims, Rebecca took what she could and moved on within 3 to 4 years maximum. But she's stayed with you longer than anyone else. Maybe I was the biggest score, Marcus said bitterly. Or maybe, Patricia said slowly, there's something else going on. I noticed something in her financial movements. 6 years ago, there was a significant increase in her hidden transactions. Not stealing from you, transferring money between her secret accounts, moving funds around in unusual patterns. And these patterns spike every 6 months like clockwork. She pulled up a chart showing the financial activity. This is consistent with blackmail. Someone is bleeding her, and she's been paying to keep them quiet. Marcus stared at the chart, his mind reeling. Who? We don't know yet. But whoever it is, they know something Rebecca desperately wants hidden. Something worth paying hundreds of thousands of dollars over 6 years to keep secret. A thought occurred to Marcus. David said Rebecca mentioned she'd managed complicated situations before. And Thomas's story, the fabricated domestic violence claims. What if she's done worse? What if there's something in her past that's not just morally wrong but actually criminal? Sarah nodded slowly. I had the same thought. I've put in requests for police records in every city Rebecca has lived in, but it takes time. However, she hesitated. There is one thing. Rebecca's college roommate, a woman named Melissa Chen, died 20 years ago, just before graduation. It was ruled an accident. She fell down a flight of stairs in their apartment building while intoxicated. And Rebecca was where? Out of town, at a job interview. She had a solid alibi. But Melissa's family never believed it was an accident. Melissa wasn't a drinker, and they claimed the autopsy showed injuries inconsistent with a simple fall. The case was never reopened, but Melissa's brother, James Chen, has spent 20 years trying to prove Rebecca was involved. Marcus felt sick. You think Rebecca killed her? I think there are too many coincidences in Rebecca's life for them all to be innocent. And I think someone else has reached the same conclusion and is making her pay for it. Literally. The office fell silent as Marcus processed everything. The woman he'd married wasn't just unfaithful or manipulative. She was a predator, a thief, and possibly worse. And yet she'd stayed with him for 15 years, longer than anyone else, trapped by secrets even darker than her lies. I need to confront her, Marcus said finally. That's dangerous, Sarah warned. If she's capable of what we suspect. I don't care. I need to see her face when I ask her. I need to know the truth. Patricia closed her files. Then you need to be smart about it. Document everything, record the conversation if your state allows it, and for God's sake, don't be alone with her somewhere isolated. Marcus stood, his decision made. I'm going to do this tomorrow night. At home, where she feels safe. Where she'll let her guard down. And if she doesn't confess? Sarah asked. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling to the messages from David, the financial records, the photos, all the evidence of Rebecca's betrayals. Then I'm going to show her what I know and watch her try to talk her way out of it. Either way, I'll have my truth. As he left Sarah's office, Marcus called his lawyer and his financial advisor. By morning, he'd frozen all joint accounts and filed for divorce. Rebecca would wake up to find herself cut off from his money for the first time in 15 years. And then they would have their conversation. Marcus waited until evening, sitting in the darkened living room of the house he'd bought 15 years ago, the house where he'd carried Rebecca over the threshold, full of hope for their future together. He'd asked their housekeeper to take the week off, ensuring they'd be completely alone. He heard Rebecca's car in the driveway, her key in the lock. She came in humming, carrying shopping bags, purchases she'd made that morning before discovering her credit cards had been declined. When she flipped on the lights and saw Marcus sitting there, surrounded by folders and documents, her face went through a fascinating transformation. Surprise, confusion, calculation, and finally, a careful neutrality. Marcus, what's all this? And why aren't my cards working? Sit down, Rebecca. Something in his voice must have warned her. She set down the bag slowly, her eyes scanning the room as if looking for exits. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Marcus opened the first folder. I know about David. I know about the affair, the money you've been giving him, and how you've been manipulating him for months. Rebecca's face crumpled, tears springing to her eyes with practiced ease. Marcus, please, let me explain. I also know about Thomas Whitmore, Marcus continued, his voice hard. And the 3 men before him. I know about the $1.2 million you've stolen from me over 15 years. I know about your trust fund in the Cayman Islands. And I know someone has been blackmailing you for 6 years. The tears stopped as if a switch had been flipped. Rebecca's face went blank, her eyes cold and evaluating. In that moment, Marcus saw the real woman he'd married, and she was a stranger. How much do you know? She asked calmly. Enough. What I want to know is why. Why me? Why stay for 15 years when you've never stayed anywhere longer than 4 before? Rebecca was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she laughed, a brittle, joyless sound. You want the truth. After all these years of playing the devoted wife, you actually want the truth. Yes. She poured herself a drink from the bar, her hands steady. I stayed because you were supposed to be my retirement plan, Marcus. You were successful, ambitious, completely absorbed in your work. I thought I could build a comfortable life with you, take what I needed, and eventually leave when the timing was right. I'd have enough money to disappear somewhere tropical and live well for the rest of my life. But, Marcus prompted, but James Chen found me 6 years ago. Rebecca's voice hardened. Melissa's brother. He never believed his sister's death was an accident, and he spent 20 years tracking me down. He had no proof, there is no proof, but he had enough circumstantial evidence and enough connections to make my life very difficult if he chose to. So you paid him to stay quiet. $600,000 over 6 years, Rebecca confirmed. Every 6 months, like clockwork. At first, I could cover it from the money I'd taken from you. But James got greedy, started demanding more. I needed additional sources, which is where David came in. Among others. Others. Marcus felt sick. How many others? Rebecca shrugged. David isn't the first man I've cultivated during our marriage, Marcus. He's just the first one you found out about. Usually, I'm more careful. But that charity gala. She smiled slightly. I couldn't resist. David was getting too attached, threatening to expose me. I needed to remind him who had the power. The public humiliation, disguised as a joke, it was perfect. He couldn't retaliate without looking pathetic. You're a monster. I'm a survivor, Rebecca corrected coldly. Do you want to know what really happened to Melissa Chen? Do you want the truth you're so desperate for? Marcus wasn't sure he did, but he nodded. Rebecca sat down across from him, looking almost relaxed now that her masks were off. Melissa and I were roommates, and we were friends, real friends, actually, which was unusual for me. But Melissa knew too much. She figured out I'd been stealing from other students, forging checks, running credit card scams. She threatened to report me, to destroy my future. We argued at the top of the stairs in our building. She paused, taking a sip of her drink. I didn't plan to push her. It was instinct. She moved toward me, I pushed back, and she fell. The fall might not have killed her, but she hit her head on the landing. She was still alive, looking up at me, confused. I could have called for help. But I realized, this was my way out. So I went down to her, made sure she couldn't speak, and waited until she stopped breathing. Then I called 911, crying about my poor drunk roommate who'd fallen. Marcus felt bile rise in his throat. You murdered her. Self-preservation, Rebecca said. Melissa would have destroyed my life. I simply destroyed her first. And I've been paying for that choice ever since. James Chen may not have proof that would hold up in court, but he has enough to ruin me socially, professionally, to make me a suspect if the case is ever reopened. So I pay him, and I stay with you because your money keeps him satisfied. Not anymore. Marcus pulled out his phone. I've been recording this entire conversation. Legal in this state, by the way. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Rebecca's face. Marcus. You're going to leave this house tonight. You're going to sign whatever divorce settlement my lawyers present, and you're going to accept that you get nothing from me. In exchange, I won't give this recording to the police. You'd let a murderer go free? Rebecca asked incredulously. I'd let a murderer become James Chen's problem, Marcus corrected. Without my money, you can't pay him anymore. And I have a feeling he'll be very interested in this recording and everything else I've discovered. Let him decide what to do with it. He stood, placing a card on the table, Sarah Chen's business card, with James Chen's contact information written on the back. That's your future now, Rebecca. Running from someone who will never stop chasing you, just like you made Thomas and David and God knows how many others run from the destruction you left in their wake. Rebecca stared at the card, her face ashen. This is cruel. This is justice, Marcus said. You have 1 hour to pack what you can carry and leave. If you're not gone by then, I'm calling the police anyway. Your choice. He watched as Rebecca stood on shaking legs and walked toward their bedroom. 53 minutes later, she emerged with 2 suitcases and walked out of his life forever. Marcus waited until he heard her car drive away, then called Sarah Chen. It's done. I have the confession, and she's gone. Can you make sure James Chen gets a copy of the recording? Already on it, Sarah said. I've also contacted Thomas Whitmore and David Garrett. They both want to file charges for fraud and extortion. With your testimony and evidence, the case against Rebecca is strong. Good. Marcus, Sarah said gently, are you okay? Marcus looked around the empty house, at the life he'd built with a woman who'd never existed. No. But I will be. 3 months later, Marcus sat in a coffee shop, the same one where he'd first met Sarah Chen, reading the newspaper. The headline was small, buried on page 6, Woman arrested in connection with 20-year-old cold case murder. Rebecca's face stared out from the grainy photo. According to the article, new evidence had emerged in the death of Melissa Chen, including a recorded confession. James Chen's statement was quoted, "Justice may be delayed, but it's not denied. My sister can finally rest in peace." David Garrett had also been interviewed, describing how Rebecca had manipulated and used him. He'd started a support group for victims of financial and emotional abuse, turning his pain into purpose. Thomas Whitmore had reached out to Marcus, and they'd formed an unlikely friendship, bonded by their shared experience. Marcus folded the newspaper and looked out the window at people passing by, living their lives, most of them oblivious to the darkness that could hide behind a beautiful smile and practiced charm. He thought about trust, about love, about how 15 years could be a lie so complete you never saw the truth until it was staring you in the face. But he also thought about survival, about rebuilding, about the fact that he'd had the strength to walk away and ensure justice was served. His phone buzzed with a message from his therapist, confirming their appointment for later that week. Recovery was slow, but it was happening. Marcus was learning to trust his instincts again, to see red flags he'd ignored before, to understand that the warning signs had always been there, he just hadn't wanted to see them. The inside joke had stopped being funny the moment he'd realized it wasn't a joke at all. But standing on the other side of the nightmare, Marcus understood something important. The truth, no matter how painful, was always better than living a comfortable lie. He finished his coffee and stepped out into the autumn afternoon, leaving the newspaper and Rebecca's face behind. Somewhere ahead was a future he'd build honestly, with people who were exactly who they claimed to be. And that was enough.